So today we are doing, yes, another flower, but I'm changing it up a little bit. And this time we're going to use a red violet base coat. This is Amsterdam red violet. Now the reason I painted my sides black is because it is transparent. And if I don't have a dark color underneath it, then it will dry not very even, if that makes sense. I actually did this on a couple of Dutch pours that I did using the red violet as a base coat, and it turned out perfect. The first one I did, I used the red violet to paint the sides, and I ended up doing a lot of touch-ups just because of the transparency. And if it's not completely solid, I had darker colors and lighter colors, and I wanted it a little bit more seamless. I don't know if that makes any sense, but in any case, we're using black. Now, the one caveat is on a regular Dutch pour, you are typically left with a little bit more paint on the canvas. These get spun out, so your paint ends up a lot thinner. So I am curious if the white will end up popping through in the center. I obviously did not paint the entire canvas, so we'll just have to see what happens. Let's go ahead and pour this out. I am just gonna pour a little bit in the center. Now I'm going to spin this to get it to the thinness that I want on the canvas. Just a light little spin. So the reason I do this is because when I just pour the base coat and then give it a spin to level it out and all of that jazz, I'm still left with a little bit too much base coat in the center. Typically the color that I pour on the outside of the puddle ends up sinking in, and I just don't get quite enough of it as I'd like. So I've been doing this with the past couple flowers that I've done, and I've really liked the results. So I guess it works. So let's go ahead and pour the rest of the base coat around here. I am not going to cover my sides because what I found on the larger canvases is that there's enough paint on here already that's gonna make it to the edge, and it'll end up covering my sides perfectly. All right, let me give this a twirl. And look at that, all my sides are covered already. I think I had to put a little too much on. Let's start laying the colors here. I'm starting with Pearl Yellow. This is Amsterdam. I'm coming on top with some Prussian Blue. Now I'm gonna put just a tiny bit of gold, because I'm gonna do gold twice. Now I'm gonna put Vandyke Brown on top of this. Now I'll add more gold in the center. Now I will come around the puddle with white. This red violet color blends so well. I'm actually expecting it to throw up a lot of pinks with white. I'm expecting it to throw up some purples and like lavenders with the blue. I am gonna pour a little bit more of my base coat around this puddle just to make sure that there is enough on here so that the petals make it all the way to the edge. I'm gonna start here. I'm actually gonna add more white here. I wanna make sure that white comes through. All right, we're ready to start the blowout. Get that out. Ooh, that is nice. I'm gonna repeat this and put just a little bit more white down here. All right, so I'm gonna come in and just create a little bit of separation here. I am gonna add just a tiny bit of base coat around here and here, because I just have a sneaking suspicion this isn't gonna go where I want it to go. Just a little. I'm really just adding this around the ones that are kind of far apart that I really want to bloom out together. Actually, I'm gonna turn my fire down low and I'm gonna just hit the center. All right, moment of truth here. Let's go ahead and give this thing a spin and see what happens. I am once again gonna add just a little more base coat around here. I don't actually think this is gonna take much more. I'm gonna go just a little bit more, very light though. I think that we're actually gonna be done spinning here. Yeah, because I don't wanna lose too much over here. I think that this is it. I mean, when this dries, it is going to look completely different. So in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and hit up my edges here. The first ever Dutch pour I did with a red violet base, I was a little disappointed in how it looked when it was still wet, but it dried so beautifully because it's gonna dry such a deep, rich color. And so all of that pink and white and all those other colors that are thrown out there are really gonna pop against that really dark background. I don't know if you can see, but that red violet, obviously it threw up a lot of pink. You've got some bright pink, you've got some light pink, but when it hit with the blue, it also threw out some light shades of lavender. You got some deeper purple in there. I really, really like this, y'all. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna torch so I can take a beat and think if I want to make any adjustments here or not. So the reason I torch a lot is because, well, so when I do my initial pass with the torch, you obviously get the bubbles. However, there could still be some air trapped in that paint, and sometimes it just needs a little bit of time to rise to the top. So I do torch frequently just to make sure that a few minutes later, I don't have more bubbles rising up to the top. It does happen on almost every pour, and a lot of that is probably because the recommendation is to mix your paint and wait 2 to 3 days before you actually pour it. And the reason behind that is so that it has time for the bubbles to settle down and the air to escape. Now, I don't do that. I mix and go. Even if I do mix my paint a day in advance, I make really big batches of this base coat and I do strain it just to make sure there aren't going to be any clumps in there. And so even if I did let the paint sit for 3 days, I'm still going to strain it directly before my pour, and that's just going to introduce a lot more air. So I probably end up with a lot more air bubbles than most people. So I do torch frequently just to make sure I don't have any popping during the drying process and then creating an ugly little divot on my painting. That's kind of why I do so much torching. I know that I cut a lot of it out for you guys, but I do torch a lot. So I think we're done here. I'm really excited about this one. I love how it came out. I can't wait till it dries. I'll go ahead and take you in for some close-ups, and thank you all for watching.